I'd like to touch on the reason why we study and engage into non-duality. Remember, non-duality does not ask anything of you. There are absolutely no requirements or anything new that you have to obtain to know yourself and experience a life of ever-present happiness. But if we don't keep that in mind, if we don't keep this end game in mind, then we could lose focus on what it is that we're after. And we're after immanent peace. We're after a life that we experience mentally and physically the absence of agitation and live a life of equanimity. And so, how do we obtain that? How do we know how to quote unquote get there? And that's the paradox. The paradox is that we are already this. This is our true nature. We're just remembering this. And that's why this path is so counterintuitive, is because it's the absence of path. You are actually retracting a path back to yourself. I want to read a passage out of a book that I consider the utmost insight to existence, that just the most profound knowledge that I've come across that leads you to this life of equanimity, of peace. And even in this book says that not even this book is the answer. This book is pointing you to the answer. And the answer is you. It's only you. It's just yourself. It's just yourself. You need absolutely nothing other than yourself to know yourself. But we can use pointers to point us back. And so this book is called Guru Vachaka Kovai. In English, it is the Garland of Guru's Sayings. And it's written by a sage by the name of Muruganar. And Muruganar was Ramana Maharshi's supreme devotee. Muruganar spent more time next to Ramana Maharshi than anyone else. He spent 28 years next to him. And Muruganar himself was a scholar and a poet. And he encouraged Ramana to share his insights in how to express and know our underlying nature of reality and how to obtain it. And this book is 1,254 verses that Muruganar wrote down as he listened to Ramana give his responses to devotees. He then took every one of these back to Ramana for approval and revision. So these are all Ramana's words that have been approved by him. So I want to read you a verse that encapsulates everything that we're after here and how to obtain it. It's verse number 796, and it's under the topic of peace. And the verse is this: there is no fortune greater than peace. There is no force greater than peace. There is no excellent worship greater than peace. There is no immortal life greater than living in peace. Muruganar then makes a quote to clarify what was said here. What is here called peace is the state of stillness of mind. This can be achieved only by unceasing inquiry. When the mind knows that in truth there is nothing to reject or to accept, it will lose its movements and will abide in supreme peace. Since such peace is the seed of the natural state, it is therefore extolled as immortal life. Ramana Maharshi has a quote underneath this too. It says, "The golden crown that deserves to be worn by self-realized beings on their heads is only the tranquility that is peace. Through that noble virtue of peace, they will attain the benefit of a life that possesses the greatness of supreme bliss." So in this passage, it wraps up beautifully why we want to know ourselves so that we can obtain peace. And how do you get there? In their words, unceasing inquiry, unceasing self-inquiry, turning within and resting in and as your being. I would like to attempt to describe this permanence of equanimity in my experience. An ego, because an ego believes that it was born, it lived, and will die, it perceives everything else like that, all activity in life. It believes that it has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And it's regardless if your activities would be considered in the fun or peaceful realm, or like work or business, or, the mundane tasks. Ego doesn't care what task it is. It always has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And depending on what it is you're talking about, the beginning can be peaceful or not, or the end could be peaceful or not. So let me give you an example. Curling up for an hour to read a book. Okay, your mind says, oh my gosh, I have an hour freed up. So it starts into this hour, and it's thinking, oh, I have a whole hour. How peaceful this is going to be. And you start reading, and then you realize after about 30 minutes, oh, I'm about halfway done. And as that hour concludes, you start to get a little bummed out because your hour of peace and contentment's over, and you've got to go on to the next thing. So how about a business meeting? It's exactly opposite. You go into it going, oh gosh, a whole hour? So the first part of it, you're a little bummed. You're right. You're a little like, I got to get through this. And then you're like, oh, it's halfway over. And then as it's concluding, you're like, yes, this thing is over. I mean, even vacations, right? There's a beginning, a middle, and an end. You're like, yes, I get the next week off. This is going to be awesome. And then halfway through, you're like, oh, geez, it's halfway over. And then towards the end, you're like, I got to go back to work. So ego always sees everything it does as having a beginning, a middle, and an end. But self does not have any idea what a beginning and a middle or an end is, because itself is eternal and infinite, and it only knows that. It only is experiencing itself as that. And as you settle in to read the book for an hour, or as you attend a meeting for an hour, or you start a vacation and end a vacation, it doesn't know any of those starting, middle, or end points. It only knows, and you only knows, because that is who you are. You only know this immanent realm of peace in which these activities are happening within. They are still intimate, yet you are completely free from them. So it doesn't matter if they're perceived as positive or negative. All you know is that you are experiencing them from this permanent, immanent realm of equanimity, of peace. So utilize these words that were read from some of the greatest sages that have ever walked the planet to remember why you're here, why you're here on this planet. You're here to live in peace and happiness. That is your true nature. Allow these sages to show you how to obtain this, and that is through unceasing inquiry, turning within, turning within, turning within, and resting in and as the love of yourself. Take care.